Hey everybody, welcome back to the Get Ready podcast. This is Degani Anton. I'm here right now to go over a couple of things, talk about my platform, and have like a discussion about what I would do if I was able to get in as one of the band counselors for the Oneida Nation of the Thames. That's coming up this weekend. The elections as well on June 16th. Go out and vote. Um, I'm joined here by my brother.
Sanao Hisanto, who's also running.
So we're just, and like I said, it's just kind of go over everything. And the reason why this podcast is up as well is because neither one of us could make it to Monday when they had the what do you call it?
Candidates night.
Yeah, candidates night. Neither one of us could have made it, so that's why we're putting this up just to kind of give people still an opportunity to hear what we have to offer when it comes to actually doing the actually being part of the bank and what we would do and how we would help out and everything like that. So, yeah, without further ado, we're going to start right now, and let's get started.
Okay, so what would be the key principles that we would run on? Or what are the key principles we are running on?
Yeah,
that we
that we are running on.
that we would
Well,
implement if we were elected. That's essentially what we have to ask.
well, okay.
That's what the people want to know.
So I'll go first.
Because I think some of our values and some of our platforms kind of align politically. So it's all right if we could probably both simultaneously talk about it.
Okay, yeah, okay. So my whole thing that I'm running on and I want to give and promise to people is health and fitness. And the reason why I specifically chose that is because I believe there's not enough of it to be taken around the reservations. It's not being focused around at all. So, or I shouldn't say that. Just not as much as I think it should be deserved. Because like there could be a lot more after school programs. There could be more cooking programs. I've been doing a lot of cooking classes in the past few years, and I've been trying to get more done. It's a little hard, but like I've been able to get them out there, whether I do them at Namrin, whether I do them in Oneida. Either way, I just try to get out more essential skills to cooking, and I try to do that whether it's the youth, whether it's or like people, young adults or elders. I try to just kind of get out the information to everybody, and just more or less try to get them to understand the skill more. And even if people are already good at cooking, it's better just to get an upgrade and more like knowledge on it and everything like that.
Well, I think it's one of the most important things that has been lost on us, especially, and there's a bigger discussion to be had, but you've probably had it on your podcast about generational trauma as it pertains to residential schools. There's a lot of different ways that it affects our people that we don't really think about or take into consideration. And one of that is that, like, before all that happened, we used to be able to live off the land completely. We had farming. We had a great farming sector. We knew how to cook the meat that we would hunt. We only hunted when we needed to. We only fished when we needed to in the right season.
Yeah.
They try to accuse us of being the ones that are responsible, like a small population is responsible for depleting fish and animal stock or whatever. That's utter nonsense. It's complete utter nonsense. Like the seal thing in the north. They try to put that on us everywhere, like with the lobsters in the East lobster trade, and that's utter nonsense. Like we have always managed to maintain the population levels of the food stock, but you see, because of all that stuff, a lot of that is kind of gone by the wayside. Like a lot of our people don't even know the basics of, maybe we do know how to hunt, maybe some of us know how to farm, but it should really be something that everybody in the community knows, that everyone collectively contributes to in a way, like a great agrarian society, I think. And I think that, yeah, when it comes to health and fitness, it's one of the things that people don't think about, even just how much you can get out of your local foods, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, exactly what you said there. I mean, even just this past year, there was a lot of people that went fishing. I mean, a lot of people that were down by the river, and they were all fishing. And I seen there was quite a few people that went hunting as well. And those are awesome skills to have. And it's not like I question anyone or anything like it. I just would like to, I just would like to help them on like ideas of cooking, like different ways, because there's more than just frying fish or
Throwing a bunch of salt on it or
yeah,
something.
like there's better ways, like exactly that, like using pink Himalayan salt instead of processed salt that usually people have. It's like just to change things and add a little bit more flair to it that would actually help them excel more.
Yeah,
Because when you're healthy, you can almost kind of say that your entire world is healthy because everything gets better.
yeah, we are unfortunately dominated in a our we're in a sort of multicultural country kind of a thing. So it's important for us to get the most out of we can out of the local foods and that kind of thing. But it doesn't mean that we reject nutrition that isn't available in your local food markets.
Yeah,
That could definitely
yeah.
contribute to making the food that we do have and do get even tastier and healthier in some ways. So we don't just have to rely on, you know, grease and sugar and that kind of stuff.
I mean, I get a lot of people.
Processed.
I get a lot of people that do say it's expensive, and it's not, because what they're looking at is they're looking at the big brand grocery stores like Loblaws and like No Frills and stuff like that. And there is like, but you go to your farmer markets and you buy seasonally, and that's where you get like all your major phytonutrients and nutrients, and like like still get the healthy carbs, and you still get the healthy fats and protein and stuff from all those that are there. Like there's tons of options there, but you have to go to the farmer market to get the cheapest and like seasonally. And that's where that could also come in as well, by telling people that even if they do say, oh well, like even in the fall, if they said pumpkins are in season, but I just use them for carvings, like for for Halloween. It's like, well, there's tons of options to cooking pumpkin, whether it's soup. A lot of people are actually using it as a healthy carb now, and they're taking it, and instead of sweet potatoes, they'll put pumpkins instead, and they'll eat that. Like they'll bake them or they'll cook them off just like potatoes almost, but then they'll just turn it into like a side. I mean that's even better as well. So that's what I mean. There's tons of options, but people just have to like kind of open up to it more instead of just eating what they know. Because nothing's wrong with that, but eating what you know and upgrading it, I would call it, where you can just like take something like you eat every week, like the staples, because we grew up on that as well as the staples in Oneida, roast beef, mac, and KD, hot dogs, stuff like that. But you can slightly alter them to so they're kind of a little more healthier than what people are what people are like kind of at the norm to at the moment. So, and I think that's what I would play mostly into my entire platform within Oneida, is just like trying to get everyone to understand more of that, spending money that could be used on bringing in dietitians, nutritionists, like every week or at least every other week, like make them take turns, and the people can come in those classes all the time and to like learn more about that kind of stuff. That would be like the better thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to decolonize or if we want to sort of make our own way in the world, which I think should be the ultimate objective of First Nations communities, we have to understand how much our food plays a role in that. Like I know we disagree on this, but like maybe a McDonald's is okay once in a while because it can be quite tasty. But we just have to understand as a people how much sugar and salt and processed foods, um, how much that stuff really is pretty bad for us,
I
and
mean,
we need to move away from having an over reliance on any of those kind. Not just fast food stuff, but yeah, the stuff what you were bringing up earlier, the regular stuff that we do cook, that we think is just it's totally the norm, but it shouldn't be.
like the biggest thing I always like to tell people is when you go to eat, you should always think about how was this made, like what's in it, and that makes all the difference. Like that really makes all the difference when you stop and think, what am I eating? How was this prepared? What's in it? Like those are the things people should always think about, because that's what I constantly always think about. Even if I do, and I'm not gonna lie to anybody, I'm human like everybody else. I have a cheat meal now and then, and if it is McDonald's, the one thing I always keep in mind is, uh, most adults are allowed, like your body really can absorb a lot, like 1,500 milligrams of salt, and a Big Mac usually has about 800 milligrams. So you're getting it in one burger, and if you get the fries, you're pretty much overreaching on your salt intake in that one meal. So like that's just something to keep in mind, like stuff like that, like the nutritional effects when it comes to all foods. That's just something a lot of people should just really take into consideration. Is that's all I really want to teach people. I'm not trying to tell anybody don't eat this, don't eat that. You can eat whatever you want, but just try to, in a sense, clean up your diet a little bit.
Well,
Clean up the food
yeah,
that you're eating.
I want to say on this is that at the start of the year, I did the usual New Year's resolution thing to lose weight. And I actually made a concerted effort to count the calories that I have per day. And I've lost almost 30 pounds since then. And I think that is another pathway. Everyone has their own path, though, to achieving those kind of goals.
Yeah.
And that would be kind of the thing, is to get the information out so that people can choose the pathway that best suits them.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of physical health.
It's really that everybody's different, nobody's the same, and you just have to really go out there and get out of your comfort zone to find out what works for you. Whether that is working out in a gym, at home, in front of people, to eating different foods. It's just getting uncomfortable. It's funny to say that, but it really is the kind of saying, is getting uncomfortable so you can get comfortable with new things. And I think that's just basically the whole point of like everything I would want to push.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
Yeah, so like I said, that's just how I would love to help everybody out and like really like get out there and really like kind of just having classes every time, even coming up and talking with people all the time. Even myself, I would love to help people as much as I can.
Yeah, try to make you more health conscious.
Yeah, exactly.
Community.
Like the community garden they're installing in Oneida, great idea.
Yeah.
Like it's a fantastic thing.
Where's that?
It's right near the economic building, near employment and training.
Oh, yeah.
On
okay.
Ballpark Road.
Oh.
Yeah, near the old language center. I know it has a new name, and I'm sorry for anyone who's listened to this and I can't remember the name,
but we know where that is.
Yeah, so like that's where they have the community garden now, and it's awesome. Like it's really great, and it's like everything they do, they implement the culture. So like the language, they did seed songs when they did planted and everything like that. It was awesome. Like it was an awesome event they put up. So it's just great to see, and a lot of youth. There's a lot of youth that was there.
See, like they're the ones that are kind of interested in this kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's like what Whitney Houston says. I believe children are the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we were talking about health consciousness. I want to bring this up. Is I would like our community to be more kind of conscious in general. And I don't like to use that term because it has some implications with other groups.
Yep.
But I'll just say this. I'll just say that one of the things that I want to do personally is sort of spread the knowledge of the way that the world kind of is, from a class perspective. I think a lot of people kind of view, I don't want to zoom too much, but I think people view the world through the lens of what they're told by the mainstream media. And not just by that. And I know that this sounds like a discussion that makes people uncomfortable. But we have to have these kind of uncomfortable conversations because, far too often people will look at the news and then they'll say, well, this politician bought a pipeline and they're going to build it on indigenous land regardless. And they think, well, if only we didn't elect that politician, then we all would have been saved. Or if only like we had this guy running or that. They don't really look at the system itself. Mm-hmm. And I think First Nations people, we need to develop a more, we need to really develop our critical thinking abilities.
Yeah.
In terms of like looking at the world and not just looking at the surface level issues and saying, well, what's caused those issues? What are the root causes of those issues? And, it's fairly easy to kind of see through it. And I think most First Nations people do, they just don't really think about how little empathy makes things worse. Like I think First Nations people are genuinely mistrustful of the mainstream narrative. You know, like that's which is why we don't read the Globe and Mail or the National Post or any of these other terrible, crappy news publications that say the reason why Native people are poor is because they're lazy, which is absolute utter nonsense. And maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later as part of the platform. But you know, like we got to start understanding that there is a way forward for our community, but we have to be willing to open our mind and let that kind of come in, that sort of class consciousness, and understand about how First Nations people fit into that wider, of the bigger picture.
Yeah.
You know, and I know these sound like existential concepts and ideas, but at the same time I think that you know we'll get into a little bit more about how these actually materialize
Yep.
into concrete improvements in First Nations communities. And one of them is what we just talked about earlier in terms of health. You know, like instead of just looking at diet fads and that kind of stuff, we can actually start to acknowledge how much certain things like food plays a role in our community.
Yeah.
And you know, like, and how if we all work a little harder, it is possible for us to achieve equality. But it's going to be a lot of work to get there, and it all starts with knowledge of self.
Well, I think that's interesting too, because like when you think about reservations, I think there's some people who have a negative vision of it or version of it or thought in their head about it. Like not just natives, but I mean like outsiders as well. Like you know, anyone else that doesn't live on a res, they think of it as like a lower kind of way or very poverty, and there is a lot of that to it. But then there is ways to fix it, like in BC. What is it on the island?
Yeah, yeah. I don't need. I apologize for butchering the name, but I think it's the Tsukina Nation. How they are completely 100% self-sustainable. They have a casino, but they've taken the money and they used it to invest in green energy, and now the entire country or the entire nation is solar powered. Everyone has a job. Full employment is achieved, or I think there's very little unemployment, and they've got charging stations on every corner. So if you have an electric car, it's easy to get around. So like there's ideas like that, and people need to understand. Well, how did they get there? Was it just the casino? I don't think that's necessarily the case. If you want to get into it, you want to get into that, or are we going to go to a different topic?
Well, I'm just bringing that up because, like I said, I'm just thinking that that's something that every, not just Oneida, but every reservation should be looking towards. Which is like when people talk about having sovereignty and everything like that. Like I think that's just like one of the closest versions you can get.
Yeah,
and I mean I don't just want to say that in a sense because one thing I can think people would probably think about is, well, how close do they remember their ancestors? How much do they remember their culture? Because you can look at it like it's successful because they have this, but the other successful component to any of our nations is that part where do they remember who they are? And I don't know that about them. So I don't want to just put that out there. But I'm not saying they don't either, just in case they do. But I haven't read anything to know that for sure.
From my understanding, and this is assuming a lot, so please don't be offended, but like you see, the little bit that I know about this, you kind of see the Mi'kmaq or the Micmacs, and then you even kind of see our people.
Yeah.
And you see how we're closest to the East Coast, where all the colonization began.
Yeah.
It almost feels to me, and I think there needs to be more research into this.
Yeah.
That these are the cultures and the people that are the most ravaged by colonialism. Like, I'm not saying the Cree, Anishinaabe, or the Haida, or any of the ones like the further west you go.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they had it easy or they didn't have it as worse. I'm not saying that at all. We're all victims of this system that has suppressed us for so many years. But I kind of noticed that, like, in some ways, like the Haida do seem very in tune with their culture and with their language and who they are, and that kind of shows that a pathway for us that we need to be more in tune with our own culture and our traditions and our language, and understand that, because it's kind of like, how can you understand your place in this world without first understanding who you are
Yeah.
as a person? And and that's one of the things that I think a lot of people sometimes forget. Like, even in political discussion, like some native people who, like, I'm not saying they're worse for it, or I'm not saying they're less than, they're my brother, they're my people, but like, you talk to them, and a native person, when you talk politics, they might say, well, I'm a liberal, I am a conservative, or they might use these kind of labels. None of that really matters, especially in the system of colonialism that we're in here,
Yeah.
because you're First Nations first and foremost, as viewed by the dominant society. And no matter what you say, that's not going to change that. And so I think that's what we need to understand first, is accepting that we are First Nations people first, and then we can build from there. Not to say that these people don't.
No,
know that,
I know
but-
what you mean. To me, it really comes, like something like that. I think it really comes down to saying, when somebody sees a broke, drunk, poor native on the side, they assume we're all like that.
Oh yeah,
So like
100%.
that to me, that really comes down to one of those. We're all brothers and sisters. We should all be helping each other, not trying to tear each other down for stupid reasons or any other thought or anything like that. We should all be there for each other. It doesn't matter if they're Cree or they're Mohawk. Like, whatever you are, whatever nation you're from, you should respect the other nations, because
We're all in the struggle together, essentially.
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
Every First Nations person, well, yeah, like that's in it. We're in this struggle together. We have
Yeah.
to understand that we have to understand that, and we have to lift each other up too. And like I've met so many First Nations doctors, masters, bachelor graduates, undergraduates,
Yeah.
and they're working, they're making the community better, and even if maybe they're not in the community, but they're in the city, but they have those roots in the community, and it doesn't matter in this society that they see a drunk Indian, that reaffirms their the stereotype that they have of us. And I'm not saying stop being drunk and poor. It's like that's not,
No,
for a lot of them, that's
yeah,
not a
yeah.
choice. I'm saying that we shouldn't judge each other.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
like-
like it's about
Yeah,
us helping each other. Like,
Exactly.
Like that's how we should. That's how it should be.
exactly, 100%, 100%. I mean, like, even a First Nations person, and there was a podcast on the CBC and I'm regretting not having it right in front of me,
Yeah.
but a host, I think it was DreamQuest.
Mhm.
A host told a story in the very first episode about how he went to a bar and he wanted to get a drink, and that's a drink, like he has a drink,
Yep.
and that's
Yeah.
it. And all right away it's like, oh, are you sure you can handle it? Like, that's the kind of attitude they have, is because, like, all natives are drunks, or whatever the case is.
you're
Like, that's the
gonna-
assumption
You're gonna
they're
go on
gonna
a
make.
binge if you
Yeah,
take this one
like,
to him. Yeah.
and
yeah.
that's totally not true. That's completely not true. But it's like, that's why we have to be less judgmental of each other, lift each other up more.
Yep. Exactly.
And that's how we fight the system.
It's like one love.
Yeah, exactly. By creating our own system.
You lose that out of this.
Yeah. So, what's that?
No. No, I know what you mean. So that's just, I guess, like I said, that's just part of what we're talking about when it comes to, like, the platform and everything like that. This is just like small parts on what we want to do, that we're just kind of acknowledging that there are issues, but we need to kind of correct them, and that starts with our own people. Like, you can't be like a wanderer and go everywhere. It's better to start at the home and then work your way out to kind of help everybody. But I think every reservation needs a little help, needs a little boost, needs a little help.
I think one thing we gotta talk about is the idea of representative democracy.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the number one things that that should happen.
I
And
think
like not just because like we're trying to implement this, but like it should be every it's like someone should be appointed to it every single time. Like
well, it's I think every band counselor, regardless of who you are,
hmm
regardless of your political leanings, regardless of what you want to do, they should be open to everybody. And and based on the people I've spoken to,
yeah,
one thing that I think is an issue, but no, don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing specifically or any specific person on the band council now. I think this is a bigger problem in band council band councils
yeah,
is the idea that you are elected, you know, you are now in charge of the fate of the reserve. And so then what that breeds is a sense of higher purpose, a sense of you know, like this idea that you're putting yourself on a higher plane, and maybe because some people put them on a higher plane, and that's not correct because the band counselor is supposed to be represent the best interests of the people who elected them, and there should not be any elitism is in that. Now, I think that's might be a bigger problem with liberal democracy because we see that in House of Commons and provincial governments in Canada as a whole.
yeah,
But we as First Nations people should try to understand that as a smaller community we only have each other.
yeah,
And instead
yeah.
of trying to elevate each other amongst each other, above each other, regardless of what you've done, regardless of where you've been, we need to know that if you're on the band council, you're there for the best interest of the people who elected you, and they should come first.
Yeah, because it's the classic, nobody, like the people aren't working for you. You're working for the people.
Yeah,
That's the easy saying that once you get in, you should always be concerned if someone has an issue and they want to talk to you. Like you should always be in like it's part of your job. I think that you should have to stop if someone says, "Oh, I have a question," and you say, "Yes, what is it?" Not like I don't have time for that or oh like you gotta ask at this time or call this or call that. Don't fake out on them. Give them the actual like try to answer the question right there. And in a great rule, if you don't know, don't like BS them. Just tell them straight up, I don't know, but I will find out for you, and then get their contact information so you can find out and then get back to them as soon as you can. That's how it should be done. Not when I used to work at the long-term care home. I was one of the union representatives for Unifor, and during the actual methods and ideas of how they worked, I think it worked. I think it's like a perfect idea to implement into how representative democracy should work, even like in the Oneida Council and like the band council and how it should be done. And that's like that's like the prime thing is if someone had an issue or someone had a question and they came up to you and talked to you, like I just said, and you didn't know, you would tell them right away, I don't know, but I will find out for you and get back to you. And that way, of course, in a union, you can just like the next day go talk to them or whatever. But in like a band council, because the reservation is so big, it'd be better just to get their contact information, be able to call them, email them, text them, whatever, and then just say, "Here's what I found out," and you do it right away. You do it as soon as possible. And if it's gonna take a week or two, you let them know a day or two after and say, "I'm just calling to let you know I'm still working on it." That way, it shows them that you care. Like you're still working. You're still working for them. You're still trying to get them their answer. That way, they know that you're working. Like you're trying to do your job. And I say your job because I believe that's what the band council is supposed to do, not
And
anything else.
both of us pledge that that's exactly how we will conduct ourselves
Yes,
on
yes.
the band council in the name of the people,
Yeah, because like I said,
as they will it.
once we get in, we're working for Oneida,
But
like for all the people.
But we don't want people to think that, well, we're the exception because we're going to do this. If we could get everyone on the band council that we're elected to operate in this fashion, or maybe there are some running who are planning to operate this, and they've just they know they haven't articulated it, but they're thinking in their minds, well, that's what I'm going to do.
Yep.
If I get in, then that's great. that's great too.
I've been working on the res recently more and more as a medical van driver, and I've actually had a lot of encounters with people that were telling me stuff even before the election came around. They were telling me stuff that they would like to see on the res happen. And that alone right there made me think, oh, like only if there's something that they could get to or somebody they could go to and talk to, because I don't know and they don't know either, because they feel like, because this is, some of them even told me that they don't want to say anything because they feel it's going to fall on deaf ears anyways. So like I feel like, well, maybe it would be better if there was somebody there and it was promoted a lot too. Like I would even like to, if I'm elected, I would even like to have some place in Oneida where I could go once a week and be there for a couple hours and just let people know in advance and let them know for the rest of the time I'm there that is elected for 2 years that I would always be there so they can come and ask me something, anything they want, and I will take it to the chief. I will take it to the council and ask that, and then bring it back to them and let them know. Like here's the answer I've got. Here's what they've had to say. Like if they're asking for something very specific that I can't really answer, but if I get a bunch of them to answer it.
I think there was a statistic that said First Nations communities are the lowest voting. The band council elections have the lowest voter turnout in any elections
Yeah.
in Canada. And I think the statistic I saw specifically said the average voter turnout for First Nations band council elections is 38%.
38.
And the reason for that, and by comparison,
Yeah.
the recent provincial election had a voter turnout of 58%. And they were celebrating in the streets over that, saying it's the biggest turnout since the 90s, because typically the provincial elections had a 50% turnout.
Yeah.
So just by comparison, that's like we have much less people voting. And more often than not, we say, well, can you blame them? Because they feel the same way. Well, what's the point of even asking them? Because it falls on deaf ears. That shouldn't be a feature. Like the whole point of representative democracy is that you represent them, whatever they have to say.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's such a simple concept that it's not being executed really at all. At least as I don't see, anyways. That's what I mean. And like, if you just,
But I think that goes back to what I was talking about earlier with
Oh.
elitism. I'm not saying it's only in Oneida. That happens in a lot of places, and that makes people mistrustful of politicians. It doesn't matter how low on the totem pole they are, whether it's a band councillor, a city councillor, or a member of parliament. That kind of attitude, unfortunately, breeds a disillusionment of the electorate.
yeah, it's true. Yeah.
So, do we have time to talk about one more thing? Cause
Yeah.
did you say everything you wanted to, or do you got?
I think the only other small thing I brought up was health and nutrition, but the only other part I really wanted to just bring up is I know for sure that if I was to get in, I would be able to actually bring down personal trainers, like people to actually have routines, bring them down more regularly, have more people, so there's like a schedule they can go through. They can talk with somebody, they can go one-on-one or whatever, like, you know what I mean? Like I would do whatever I can to bring down people to do, not even just personal trainers, but like even there's personal trainers that are specifically designed for groups. So you could have a big group of people, whether that's at the community center, or it could be outside even, you know what I mean? Like you can just have it planned where like there'll always be a spot for them to come down and actually do it. And like I said, it doesn't just have to be for young adults. You could also do a class for youth, like young kids, young adults, elders even, like work with them and everything like that. I mean, there's already Moccasin Flow, which is a yoga thing that Lisa Hill's been doing. And I hear it's doing great. And it's just stuff like that. Like I would like to put more stuff like that on the res so people can have a lot of other options as well, not like and everything else. So that's just my other major point that I wanted to bring up that I really want to kind of put in, that I would also try to incorporate more into Oneida.
Like we share a lot of values, But the idea of economic empowerment is something that I'm specifically fighting for. And I'm hoping the rest of the band council gets on board, but I know it's going to be a lot of work to do that. So think about how there's at least 3 million First Nations people, and say they all had $20 that they would spend at the movies. And then all together, that's 3 million people. $20, 60 million right there. What if instead of putting it into the latest corporate mega film, we put it into our own community? And this is something that we have to understand, is that like if we start to invest in our own community and that money circulates in our own community, suddenly we have more money in our community. In Spain, in Basque Spain, for instance, one of the poorest areas in Spain, I saw this great talk from Richard Wolff, the economist, who explained about how they had gotten together and they formed their own cooperative.
Yeah.
In 1956, in a very poor part of Spain, which was at that time a very poor country anyway, but in one of the poorer parts, a Catholic priest named Father Arizmendi gave a famous speech, 1956, to his parishioners who were unemployed. He said, look, if we wait for a capitalist to come here and give us jobs, we will all die of old age before it happens. So let's solve this problem by not waiting. Let's solve the problem by becoming our own employers. In other words, let's set up a worker co-op. The name of the town where they did this is Mondragon. So in 1956, with a total of 6 local Basque workers, Father Arizmendi set up a co-op. Fast forward to today, end of the year 2017. The Mondragon Cooperative Corporation includes about 250 active worker co-ops. Altogether, united in this large corporation, they are the 7th largest corporation in Spain. They include over 100,000 workers.
Wow.
In 250 co-ops.
Wow.
Let me give you an idea of what that means. Once a year, all the workers in a co-op, and they produce everything from food to grocery stores to manufacturing stoves and refrigerators, all kinds of things. Once a year in every worker co-op, there's a meeting of all the workers where they assess the managers to determine whether the managers will be retained or fired, whether the managers will get more or less in their way of pay. The managers don't hire the workers in a worker co-op. It's the other way around. Let me give a second example. At other meetings, they typically meet once every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks. They also make decisions about wages. Here is the current rule governing Mondragon. The highest paid worker cannot make more than 8.5 times what the lowest paid worker earns. Here in the United States, for a large corporation, the ratio between what the CEO gets and the lowest paid worker is around 300 to 1, not 8.5 to 1. Guess what? In Mondragon, they don't have the inequality of income that we suffer from. Why not? Because the workers would never tolerate it. They would never vote for it. And that's how wages get set.
And the reason why they did that is the reason why they were able to have that kind of success is because they worked collectively. And that's one thing that we need to get out, is this sort of individualism. The idea that I'm going to start a singular business and pay workers less than the minimum wage for my own personal enrichment.
Yeah.
You know, that specifically comes from colonialism and the settler society. Whereas we've always been a communal society back in the old days. And we can be that now. And we can be it in a new modern way by economically empowering the entire community. And we do that through basic principles that have always existed in First Nations communities: environmentalism, collectivism, socialism.
The election is on June 16th, this Saturday. This entire discussion was just to talk about our platforms and what we are going to do if we get in. So I hope everyone goes out and votes. It's pretty important, whether you think it is or not. There's always something there to actually go and vote for. So I hope everyone goes out that day and goes out and vote June 16th.
Yes, please vote.
This is Get Ready Podcast, and I will see everybody next time.